If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. Serious, what's the creepiest or most unexplainable thing you've ever seen that you haven't shared anywhere? When I was about 8 or so, my family went up to a campsite near a lake. We went with several other families and they brought their kids too. One thing me and this one kid would do is search the shallow areas for crawdads. As I was searching, I began to venture a ways out until the water was up to my waist. The water wasn't too clear, but it also wasn't muddy, and I could see the pale area of the shallows and the darker area where the water dropped off, but I didn't know that at the time. I ended up stepping into the darker, deeper water and began to fall in. Before I could, a pale, slender arm grabbed my leg and pushed me back to the shallows. All I saw was the arm as it sunk back into the deeper water before I skittered back to the shore. I remember it as clear as day, but nothing has ever turned up from that lake, no bodies, no drownings, nothing. My parents still think I made it up. I am a forest ranger and hunt averagely. I live in the Netherlands and was on a hunting trip in Germany. Now I am a Germanic pagan, which means that I believe in the old gods and even some of the fearful creatures that come out at night for them to hunt. This was at day 3 of what was supposed to be a hunting trip off a week. Things were going well. I had seen a lot of game in the past 3 days. I was tracking a deer since day 2 by that time. Anyway, it was night and I had set up a tent in the woods. This would normally be illegal, but I had an agreement with the owner of the forest since it was a relative of mine. I was sleeping when I would suddenly be woken up by a weird sound in the woods. I originally thought it was an animal, but I had no knowledge of one making a sound like this. It was about 2 in the morning and I thought nothing much of it, so I tried going back to sleep, with my knife a little closer than before. I failed in going back to sleep because the weird sound had me in its grasp. There was something about it that was so interesting to me. It was kind of a low burling sound like you would hear from a male deer when it's mating season. The problem was that it wasn't mating season. The sound also had a strange high-pitched tone and a sort of growl at the same time to it that a deer would not been able to make. Interested to what it was out there, I grabbed my rifle and knife and went to take a look outside. The sound was back again. I now walked in the distance of the sound, now also with a healthy bit of fear of the unknown. I got closer and closer to the sound when I suddenly stepped into water. There was a pool in front of me. A bit irritated that I got my socks wet over my own imagination, I decided that it was in my head and that I should go back to my tent. But then I saw a glimpse of something at the edge of the water at the other side of the pool. It was something that looked like a mix between a big black wolf-like creature and a kind-of deer, since I thought to have seen that it had antlers. I couldn't see it clearly because it was almost pitch black, but I went back straight away. Not even shooting at it. I couldn't sleep the entire night thinking about what I had heard and seen. I started thinking about the creatures that I had read of and thought it maybe was a Aufhaker, a type of shapeshifter in German mythology. But at the end of the night I came by the conclusion that I should continue hunting. I shot a deer 2 days later and went home. Not forgetting what I had seen in the night, since it gave me a good fright. But mostly because there are way more dangerous creatures than that in the woods, if you should believe in the folklore or mythology. A long time ago in primary/elementary school, me and my friend came to the school compound on a Sunday to explore. We came in the wee hours in the morning, and coupled that it was a Sunday, there was nobody in. We were walking along a corridor on the first floor, when suddenly we heard this thunderous noise above us. You know the sound where you drag a chair or a table across a floor? It was exactly that, but it sounded like there's multiple classrooms full of tables and chairs just moving around. It was loud. Very loud. And it was extremely sudden. There's no reason why anybody would be in school, moving dozens of tables and chairs on their own on a Sunday 6 a.m. We stood rooted, stared at each other for a second, and bolted. After we got out of school, he asked me whether I heard a lady screaming in the corridor. I said no. He didn't hear the dragging sounds either. Was driving through the rural south with my only one car in front of us. A Volvo? I remember it had that old beige color. Winding road in Appalachian Mountains. The kind where if you don't slow down, off the edge of the mountain you go. There's a sharp turn. We expect it because we've done this route so many times before. The car in front of us slams into it at an angle, his left nose looking like it's going to be fucked up. I see pieces and fragments of it falling off. Instead of stopping, he keeps driving. Weird. 10 minutes later we get off the last mountain and onto a decently major highway. There are plenty of exits, car still doesn't get off. We start to pass car using the left passing lane. And lo and behold, the car is spotless. No sign of the damage. Not even a scratch. We had both literally seen actual pieces flying off this car, and there is absolutely no sign of damage. Also, immediately after we pass him, the guy quickly gets off the highway. He was wearing what looked like an Indiana Jones type hat and you couldn't see his face. But he noticeably hunkered down after seeing us notice him. It was the strangest thing. I almost feel like it was some glitch I wasn't supposed to see, but I'm not saying it was. I believe in science and not glitches, but dang. It's been years and we still talk about it. Creepy things happen in those mountains. I was reading the Appalachians used to be connected to the Scottish Highlands millions of years ago. Makes sense to me. Had also met a no-nonsense oil tanker guy who swore he had seen a Sasquatch in West Virginia. Of course it was West Virginia. Not really all that much to tell. I remember playing around the wooded block of my neighborhood opposite of my house when I was young, and when I was all tuckered out and decided to go home, I looked into the woods. There, in front of me and right off the sidewalk, was a straight path from where I stood into the forest towards where I thought my home was. Weirder still, the path seemed to be a dirt track lined with roots. Not overgrown, but worn and beaten down roots. The trees on either side were bowed over it, providing sorta a natural ceiling to the path. In the distance, I could see what I thought was the back deck to my house, or a house. Overall, it was pretty much an invitation to just go that way. Of course, I wasn't the adventurous soul, and a sidewalk beat tripping over roots any day, and the fact that I pretty much knew that I'd never seen this path before, and the weird feeling that the distance this path went was far longer than I thought the forest went before it hit housing again. Kid me did the smart thing and just thought neat. And went the long way around. I never saw that path again. When my daughter was very young, 3 to 4, we were on a family vacation in a state park lodge. Our room had exposed wood ceiling beams to match the decor, important later. It was supposed to be nap time for my daughter, but she was quietly playing by herself and just chatting away, and the wife and I were reading on the other bed. Out of the blue, my daughter turns to me and asks for a piece of rope. I asked why she needed the rope, and she nonchalantly replies, "It is for my friend, the purple girl on the ceiling." My wife asks, "What friend?" And my daughter responds, "I've been talking with the little purple girl hanging from that wood up there," points to the ceiling beam. She asked me for another piece of rope. Needless to say that nap time was over and we quickly exited the room. When I was 20, I visited a town in Italy that has a number of medieval towers that you can climb. My girlfriend didn't want to climb any, so I went up one on my own and was the only person at the time doing so. It was a sunny day when I entered the tower. There was a flight of stairs that wound around the edge of the tower and no windows. Climbing the tower took at the very most 5 minutes. At the top of the stairs there was a ladder and a trapdoor that opened up onto the roof of the tower. When I opened it, I found the weather had changed dramatically and was overcast and threatening. I forget if there was thunder or not, but I was genuinely concerned about lightning, being at the top of a tall tower in that weather. I cautiously climbed out onto the roof just to have a quick look before going straight down. The roof was surrounded with a sort of metal cage of bars that were clearly intended to prevent anyone falling/jumping off the tower. I heard some thunder and saw electricity arc between some of the bars, not a blinding lightning strike, just arcing. I decided that the tower was imminently going to be struck and descended as quickly as I could. At the bottom, I was surprised to find the weather was again sunny with a clear sky. My girlfriend could tell I was shaken, and was amazed when I told her I thought that maybe there had been lightning. The weather hadn't changed whilst I'd been up the tower. I've started to tell the story a couple of times, but it's just too weird to expect anyone to believe. I have literally no explanation. I'm very much a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I'm not religious, and I've had no other weird experiences like this. In short, I'm not your stereotypical spooky things happen to me kind of person. And yet, the story of the boy who disappeared from the Smokies is one of the strangest and creepiest stories of a child disappearing I have ever heard of. The reason I haven't told anybody is because it involves a whole bunch of conspiracy that not many people would actually believe. Dennis Lloyd Martin disappeared from the Smoky Mountain National Park in Tennessee on June 14, 1969. He was playing with 2 other boys, one his relative, one who came from a different family who also had the last name of Martin. His father witnessed him go into a bush. He just thought he was going to try and pop out to scare the 2 other boys. But after a while, his father got concerned as the other boys had passed by the bush multiple times, and he still hadn't popped out. His father checked the bush. Dennis was nowhere to be found. His father raced into the forest, as it was only a few feet away, and ran for 2 whole miles before he realized there was no way in hell his son could have made it that far in the amount of time he had been missing. 5 miles away, another family was wanting to look for a place to spot some bears. A forest ranger guided them to a spot that had known bear activity. When the family got to the spot, they heard a loud and shrill roar, unlike any animal I've ever heard, as the father put it. He then said his wife, and his young son witnessed a large, upright figure, walking along the horizon, but when it spotted them, it tried to stay hidden. The father was scared shitless, but he was able to ingrain a couple of the creature's features into his brain. It was tall, shaggy, and furry. But he was also able to get the detail that it seemed as though it was carrying something. Something bright red. Dennis was wearing a bright red shirt that day. When the search for Dennis was called, the Park Service weren't the only ones searching. The FBI and Green Berets also arrived to search for Dennis. But the Green Berets wouldn't say who told them to be there, and why they were trying to look for some random kid. Every request for these details to be revealed were flat out ignored. Years later, Dennis' father, who had tried to forget about Dennis to move on with his life, said as though it seemed as though the three government entities weren't working together, but competing against each other. As if there was some prize at the end of this case. But going on, the family who had witnessed the furry and shaggy figure tried to report this to forest rangers. The father even offered to go to the FR station and show them the spot he had witnessed the creature. But they said, "We'll come to you." Yet they never did. Feeling as though his account wasn't being taken seriously, he went to the press. They published the story about a furry, tall, and shaggy creature that showed up only hours after the boy disappeared. How the deafening scream was that of no other animal. Yet the detail of it carrying something was completely left out. Nobody would take the paper seriously if they did. Dennis' father learned about the ape-man or man-bear as the media called it, through the newspaper, not the wildlife services. When he confronted them, they said the account was inconsequential and wouldn't lead anywhere as it didn't fit the time frame. The other family's account was 2 hours after many officials deducted the time at which Dennis disappeared. Dennis' father walked the trail to the spot the creature was witnessed. It took him only an hour and a half, and that was on the track. If something went through the thick and hilly forest, it could 100% take 2 hours to walk to that spot. In the end, Dennis was never found. Months of searching and not a single trace of the boy was found. For the rest of his life, Dennis' father firmly believed that whatever happened to his boy that day, the Shaggy Man had something to do with it. Look up the boy who disappeared from the Smokies on Google and YouTube. Hi all, this is actually a true story as I live and breathe. I was about 16 or 17 years old. I'm 34 now. I and my friends used to think it was really cool to hang out in graveyards together. We were stupid, so we agreed one morning to meet up about 6 a.m. in the graveyard and just hang for a while. We had done this several times previously, always basically deserted except for a mourner once in a while. So I ride my bike into the graveyard. There are only 2 entrances to this place and they're about 30 yards away from each other. I'm sitting in about the middle of a fairly big graveyard just looking around waiting for my friend. I'm sitting there in dead silence for about 15 minutes just enjoying the quiet. Suddenly a guy dressed from head to toe in all black walks into the graveyard. He has a hoodie on over his face, but I figure he's just in mourning or something. He walks over to a gravestone with his back to me. I assume he didn't see me when he walked in. He stares at the grave for about 10 seconds, then goes to the grave right beside it, the same thing, goes to the next grave, keeps doing this. I start to get weirded out now, so I quickly get on my bicycle and then I kick up the kickstand, which makes a loud noise. He spins around and I can see he is wearing a balaclava on his face. Now I'm really scared. I start riding towards the exit and the dude starts sprinting at me at a fast clip. I have to literally ride through graves to get away from this guy because if I'd have stayed on the path he would have gotten to me. I make it out of the graveyard and am pedaling very fast away from the place. I get about 30 seconds of pedaling in and look backward at the graveyard. The dude is still running towards me down the road even though he has no hope of really catching me at this point. I'll never forget seeing him running after me like something out of the Terminator film. I told my friends and we all decided never to go near that place again. It was terrifying and I still think about it from time to time wondering what that dude could have possibly been doing. About a year ago I was in the car by myself on the freeway. It was a clear, sunny day. I was driving about 20 yards or so behind a semi. I glanced down for a second, literally a second, to adjust the volume on the stereo. When I looked up, the sky had gone completely gray and there was a mist of fog floating in the air. The semi in front of me had rolled over on its side and was sliding quickly backwards towards me. I knew I didn't have time to avoid it because I was still going 65 miles per hour, and there was a car behind me so I couldn't slam on the brakes. My breath caught in my throat and I felt panic rising and I was completely overwhelmed by the knowledge that I was about to die. In that split second, I saw my daughter's face in my mind and felt the weight of knowing I wouldn't see her grow up, and it was the worst thing I've ever felt. Terror, panic, devastation, desperation, remorse. It felt like time slowed down as I watched the semi slide towards me, and I started to suck in a breath of air, I think probably to scream, and I blinked. Suddenly the semi was upright in its own lane, still about 20 yards in front of me, driving completely normally. The sky was sunny, the fog was gone, and it was like nothing had happened. My hands were still gripping my steering wheel so hard that it hurt and my heart was pounding. I started shaking uncontrollably and pulled over on the side of the freeway and almost threw up. I called my husband and told him what had happened, and he suggested that I'd either hallucinated or gone through an actual fog patch, and the sunlight refracted off the fog to create a trick of the light, making me think I saw something that wasn't there. But there was not fog anywhere after I blinked. The only thing in my rear view mirror was the car that had been behind me. I can still picture it in my head clear as day. I was not ill, not on drugs, and have never hallucinated. I have no logical explanation, but there's a part of me that thinks that I died that day in an alternate reality, and that the experience was so intense that I experienced it in this reality as well, or that the universe was sending me a warning. I know how ridiculous that sounds, but I don't know how else to reconcile this experience. I'm a very logical, skeptical person, and this shook me to my core. I do not drive behind semis anymore. Ever. I have pretty much kept this story to myself. I remember telling one person who told me, "Don't repeat that, don't mess with whatever that was," so I didn't. I guess listen at your own risk. When I was 10, I went with my parents to this campground so they could visit their friends. They had a son who I got along with, same age. Sometimes, however, if there was other kids around, the son would try and pick on me to impress them. Me and the son went fishing, and right as we're about to leave, another kid comes and joins us, and the son immediately starts picking on me. Not wanting to be stuck on a boat and teased, I decided to leave and walk back to the campground by myself. I didn't want to go straight back to my parents because they'd ask why I wasn't with the son, and I didn't want to get into it. So I just walked on this U-shaped road. In the center of the U are campers, and on the other side is woods with a lake around it. At the very center of the U is a park. Perfect. I think I'll just sit on the swings until I think enough time has passed to go back. As I'm on the swings, I notice a path directly across from me. I get up and start walking along this dirt path. There are reeds on either side of me, and I have my hands stretched out as I walk dead center of this path. My hands can just barely touch these reeds unless I move closer to one side. I walk for about 10 minutes maybe, and I get to this pond. Crystal clear water, and I have this urge to drink it. It looks so refreshing. I kneel down, and suddenly the hairs on the back of my neck go straight up. It was like I snapped back into myself. What am I doing? Why am I about to drink pond water? Why did I walk down this path? I start feeling really uneasy, so I turn around and start walking the same way I came. Let me clarify. There was only one path. Straight. I made no turns. I didn't walk around this pond. I simply walked to the end of the path, got freaked out about something, and turned around. Suddenly all types of bugs were now around. I kept walking, and I noticed the dirt path is getting more and more narrow. The reeds and tall grass are now at my arms, and there's a constant buzzing feeling in my ears from these bugs. The path gets so narrow that I have to walk sideways to avoid the reeds. I yell out help, and I hear a voice ask if I'm okay. I reply I'm lost, and a woman says, "Just walk straight, honey, I see you." I see nothing, it's just tall grass and reeds. I walk a few feet and see the road. I am scratched from head to toe, and there's a woman by the playground asking what happened. She takes a Kleenex out of her pocketbook and starts wiping some of the scratches, and I tell her what happened. I look behind me and see no path. I'm at the same park. I'm in front of the swing I was just on. The woman looks at me and tells me that I shouldn't even think about it and to just forget it happened because I'm fine now. But she really emphasized not to talk about it. I've always been on the fence about it. I'm sure there was one path in and one path out. The bugs could have steered me off course. Maybe me being paranoid? Or something more sinister that nearly trapped me for good. I was young and digital cameras were a new thing. I was obsessed with them, and my mom would buy me a camera. We'd try it and see if we liked it, and if it was shitty we'd take it back. We purchased a cheap one. Indoor pictures had a red and yellow hue. It had long exposure, so a lot of the times there were streaks and weird stuff. I took a picture of my room one day, and plugged it up to the computer to view the picture. There was a full-blown man, wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt with a hat. There were also light streaks in the picture, but he clearly looked different from the imperfections, like there was a man actually there in mid-walking motion. I called my mom right before commenting this to ask if she remembers that. She said she didn't really. I don't believe her because the camera immediately disappeared after this event and she never got me another. When I think about it now in my late 20s, it still makes tears come to my eyes because the house I grew up in was so scary and weird. I've never felt like that in any other home. Something was off. Back when I was 9 or so, me and my friend were having a sleepover. His parents were at a dinner, and his brother was out getting stoned somewhere. Anyways, it was probably 9 p.m., his parents had just called and said that dinner had turned into drinks, and they would be out for a little while longer. Anyways, we were young, playing Minecraft on the Xbox 360. When we heard his front door open. It had a very noticeable noise when it opened, very creaky, almost eerie, so we thought, oh, it's probably just your brother. And kept playing, thinking nothing of it. Then, we heard footsteps, on the floor above us. We once again thought nothing of it, seeing as his kitchen was above the basement where we were playing games, and his brother was likely there for mid-high munchies. But then, we heard another set of footsteps. We were confused at this point, but we didn't worry as it was either his parents or a stoner friend of his brother. We then heard a scratching at the basement door. We both looked at each other like, is that just me or is there a scratching? He didn't have any pets, so, me being the oldest by 2 months, went to go check. I opened the door and there was nothing there. I yelled upstairs to his brother, let's call him Jim. Jim, you're not scaring us. Stop it. No reply. So I sat back down and continued playing. Now, there was a scratching on the window. We were honestly terrified, and we stayed seated, one of us looking at the door, the other looking at the window. Then, again, scratching at the door. I opened it with a baseball bat in hand, and nothing. We barricaded the door and put things in front of the window. We didn't hear anything for the next half an hour, and eventually fell asleep. The next morning his dad came down and knocked on the door, and tried to get into the basement. We took down the barricade, and his dad came into the room, furious. Why the hell did you guys rip open the screen door? We went upstairs and sure enough, the front door's screen was shredded. We tried to convince him that it wasn't us, and that the brother had done it to scare us. But what he said next made our blood run cold. Jim wasn't home at all last night. We dropped him off in the city with his friends. My friend's house was half an hour away from the city, and none of the people at his friend's house had cars. Me and my friend looked at each other, and couldn't speak. Needless to say, his parents didn't believe us, they called my parents, and me and my friend had to split the cost to have the basement door replaced. It had tons of scratch marks as well, and the screen door replaced. Me and my friend still bring this up to this day. Whenever we meet. I had a friend in high school who was going through a really rough time due to certain events I won't go into detail about, and she was just slowly losing her mind. She wasn't sleeping, she barely ate, she was just on a major mental decline. The thing is, her mom had schizophrenia, and had started to go downhill when she was just a few years older than my friend was at the time. I was the only one who really knew what was going on with her, and I was her only companion. One day, walking around the school, she was on edge. When I asked what was wrong, she quietly said, "Don't you see that man? Where? He's behind us. He's so big. And dark? Like a shadow. Do you see him? He's there, right? Please tell me he's there." Her eyes were all big and wide, her cheeks were shallow and she had bags under her eyes. She genuinely looked like a horror movie stereotype of a mentally ill person. I've never seen anyone like that in real life. I glanced behind me and didn't see anything, but I told her I did anyway. We both believed in ghosts and stuff, so I took to reminding her how bad ghosts and demons follow people and latch onto them when they're in extreme emotional and mental distress. Oh, thank goodness. I've been having nightmares a lot lately. I keep seeing things and hearing things. Maybe a ghost is haunting me. I just don't want to lose my mind. I don't want to end up like my mom. I hugged her and we kept walking. I told her think good thoughts and maybe the ghost would leave her alone. It was so scary watching this close friend just slip away into nothingness, seeing her bright and happy demeanor replaced by one of deep pain and sorrow. Scared out of her mind that she'd end up in a mental hospital somewhere. I can't imagine the existential horror of knowing you may very well end up schizophrenic like your mom, just scared, waiting for that day, waiting for that one thing that just pushes you off the ledge of your sanity. She's a lot better now, and hasn't shown signs of schizophrenia, and we're both approaching our mid-20s, which is usually when schizophrenics start to show signs of the disorder. She's experienced worse things now than what she had experienced back then. None of it took as big of a toll on her because she learned to handle her problems. She's come a long way, and I'm very proud of her. I used to live in really rural Texas and was driving down a farm to market, road during some very thick fog. I was in an old pickup truck, and was going maybe 20 to 30 miles per hour because I couldn't see very far ahead. Super glad I was. As I came around a turn I saw through the fog this big hulking figure lurching across the road. I slowed down, pulled up near it to pass, and saw what was the biggest hog I've ever seen in my life. A good 400 pounds certainly. It was dead, probably destroyed whatever car hit it, and dragging it to the side of the road, an absolutely massive white shaggy dog. Y'all, this dog. I was in a pickup truck, and this dog made eye contact with me, lifted its head, and stared me level in the eye for what felt like an eternity. I stopped my truck and stared. I was so caught off guard. After probably a few seconds, felt like forever, it put its head back down, grabbed a chunk of hog, and continued making its way off the road. To break it down, this dog was smart enough to move the animal it wanted to eat, large and strong enough to drag a 400-ish pound hog across pavement, and tall enough to look me in the eye in a pickup. I will never forget those eyes. It had mud-stained white fur, a big block head, and a long wolfy tail. It looked almost like a Pyrenees, common around there, but with a big St. Bernard-shaped head and double the normal size. Big glowing yellow eyes. I have no idea if it was some freak mutant farm dog, a spirit, a wolf, or what, but I'd like to never see it again. I used to live in the middle of nowhere. The town had less than 200 people in it. I used to work through the night in one of the metro areas, and it was about a 40-minute drive with about 15 of it on a county road. I used to think I would see shit in the fields, coyotes, deer, etc., all the time. Never thought twice. Well, one morning I was on my way home, about 3 a.m., and we had a little bridge to cross right before we got to our road. As I'm closing in on crossing the bridge, I can see something pearl white just hanging out in the middle of the road. Thought it was probably a swan and it would move. As I got closer, I realized that swans are not that big. I was in a F-150 and it was at eye level with me. When its wings opened up, it literally covered both lanes of traffic. I swerved to miss it, but hit some of the wing. I slammed on my brakes and turned around. Whatever it was 100% gone without a trace. Never saw it again. If it was a bird, that's the fucking biggest bird I have ever seen. Oh, and I did not alive by anything considered to be a large body of water. Here is a creepy/weird story. During a road trip from NJ to NC, my friend and I decided we were hungry and went looking for food in a town in Maryland. I don't remember the name of the town, but it felt very strange as soon as we pulled onto the main road, as there didn't seem to be any people out and about. It was the middle of the day, but no one was walking around. There weren't any restaurant food options other than a pizza place, so we pulled up and parked in front of the pizza place. It seemed like everyone in the town must have gone to that pizza place. When we parked the car, everyone in the restaurant turned and looked at our car through the big glass windows. Like, at the same time. They stared at us, we stared at them. It felt so weird that I said, "I don't want to go in there." My friend just nodded at me wide-eyed, and we drove to another town for lunch. Why was seemingly the whole town in that pizza place? What was with the staring? I'm almost a little sorry we didn't go in to find out, but at the same time not sorry at all. Yo, I have a story. So my boyfriend and I took a vacation to Colorado one summer. Please note this was early August. Well, we go to the mountains and hike for a day in Rocky Mountain National Park. It gets to be late in the day and we need to decide if we should leave the park through the main entrance or take the road loop to see more of the park. We had a bit over a quarter tank of gas, but we decide to do the road loop. Well, we hit the highest point in the road right at sunset. It's beautiful and romantic, yada yada. Time to go. We hit the cloud line at the same time as the tree line, and gorgeous sunset suddenly turns into gloomy, creepy night, and we both start trying to freak each other out with scary stories. We're also a bit on edge because we aren't used to mountain driving. So anyways, we drive and watch our gas tank get lower and lower. We assume there must be a gas station just outside of the park, but alas, as we leave we just keep driving into the wilderness. Phone signal is spotty and we start getting really worried about gas. After what feels like an hour, we finally start up a hill and see lights of a town up ahead. Thank God, they must have a gas station. Now, I remind you, it's about 10 p.m. in the middle of the week in August. We crest the hill and there is just Christmas. I'm taking Christmas tree up in the town square, ornaments from each street light, lights hung on the houses. It's Christmas. We slow down and pass a church, and through the windows can see a full men's choir singing and clapping late at night in August on like a Thursday or some shit. We both get a horrible feeling about this town, but we need gas. We pull into the station and my boyfriend goes to pee while I fill up, and when he comes out he just hurriedly tells me to get into the car, we're leaving now. There were two men taking in the store that stopped and just stared at him the whole time he was in there, never breaking eye contact. 100% freaky cult town for sure. When I was younger, around 8 years old or so, I used to lie awake in bed and listen to someone play our piano late into the night. My brother and I both took lessons, but being elementary-aged kids we could really only play the most basic songs. Also, neither of our parents knew how to play, so it couldn't have been them either. And yet, I would find myself getting up to use the bathroom well after everyone had gone to bed, and there it would be. Piano music so beautiful that I would sit on the floor of the bathroom and listen. I didn't know the word back then, but I would definitely describe it today as ethereal. The music would be quiet though. I often wondered if it was maybe in my head, but I had no way of creating it. I played piano for over a decade, and believe me, learning to play music and learning to create music are vastly different things. I cannot make music to save my life. Surprisingly, I never felt worried or like I needed to go investigate. Instead, I would just sit and enjoy for a bit before heading back to bed. As I got older and busier, I found myself sleeping through the night and never really heard the music again. But I do often think back now and wonder where in the hell it could have been coming from. One time, me and 2 other friends from Miami went home to my home in Kansas to visit my grandmother because she wasn't doing well. She later passed away that month, and one night me and my friend went out on a drive while my other friends stayed with my grandma to check on her every once a while. Anyway, me and my friend had went out to go find, I don't remember exactly what, so I'm just going to say a random product, milk. We had took a wrong turn, and this part almost seemed like out of a movie. Our radio had stopped working. It was like maybe 10 p.m. out there, so currently, we in the middle of a random dirt road in almost nowhere in Kansas. Me and my friend get out of the car to see our surroundings because there wasn't any service, and about 5 minutes outside of our car, we see a very large deer, jumping around in the field to our right side. I get my buddy to look at the deer and he sees it, too. It was maybe like 50 yards away from us. About like half a football field. The deer has seen us, too. It all goes silent. The large deer starts to let this super loud scream that almost sounds like a fucking elk, but a lot more human-like, that goes on for about 15 seconds, and in the middle of it he starts to stand up on his 2 legs and starts to run at us. We get back in the car so quick and drive away as fast as we can, as fast as our car can go. I remember distinctly that sometime in the middle of our panic, our radio starts to come on and it's playing a Ward tour by A Tribe Called Quest. That was one of my favorite songs, but now I can't listen to it without remembering that scene. When came straight home, I pulled my friend to the side and me and my other friend tell him the story of what had happened, and throughout the whole time, he thought that we were bullshitting him. I think by some point, he started to believe the story, but it was by far the creepiest I have ever experienced. I've never told anyone because I know it's ridiculous. But I also know what I saw. I was walking my dog one night after getting home from work, bartender, so it read like 2 a.m. I was completely sober, but a little worn down. I heard a weird rustling noise behind me, but there was no wind. My girl had all her hair standing up and was low growling. I thought I saw a shape in the road, but my phone's flashlight wouldn't throw light that far and I didn't bring a flashlight. Tried walking towards it, but my did wouldn't budge. So I told her to wait and went closer to check it out. It was a big ass tree. In the middle of the road. Like growing out of it. I just drove down this road to get home, it wasn't there then. I thought my eyes were fucking with me due to the light, so I kept waking closer but felt dread in my gut. This thing was easily 20 tall, but it was a tree, so I urged myself forward. I was scared enough to tuck my shirt behind my gun just in case I had to draw. But like it's a tree, so I kinda laughed at myself for even doing that. Well, when I got about 50 it moved. I saw it get up and crash loudly into the woods. I screamed, turned and ran. Picked up my dog at full sprint and didn't look back until we got inside. Still have no fucking idea what that was or what possible explanation there could be for it. I have several creepy stories, but this one is particularly fresh in my mind because it happened 2 days ago. I went for a bit of a walk because we're allowed out to exercise, came back, went to put my key in the door. I've always had this thing where I hate static shocks. So, I very lightly touched the doorknob with the tip of my finger. Yes, I know, this is the way to get static shocks, but I never said I was smart. And the doorknob suddenly turned to the side, like someone was about to leave the house at that instant. I opened the door expecting to have a laugh about it. Would have taken me about 2 seconds, and nobody on the other side. I've since tried to replicate it. The doorknob is a bit loose on the other side, but the side that faces outdoors is sturdy, and it was a feather-light touch on my part. In order to wrench the doorknob like that, you would need to grip it and twist. Still can't explain it, but given that I see shadows move around the house, things randomly fall over, people have independently commented on the weird vibe of 2 downstairs rooms without prompting, and a video once unpaused for me the second I walked through my door, I am beginning to wonder if there's something there. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm agnostic and don't believe in the supernatural. My mother's mother had prayed in a small temple in India and promised to perform some ceremony. I'm not too sure of the details, because she was unable to have a child at the time. She later had my mother but didn't go back to the temple. My grandma passed away young, when my mother was 18 to 19. About 3 years ago, my family decided to visit the temple because my mother wanted to pay her respect there and kind of complete my grandma's promise or whatever. The temple was for a goddess, and so as an offering, we brought jewelry and a sari, which is a traditional Indian drape-like clothing. As per the tradition of the temple, the sari wasn't draped on the main stone idol of the temple, and they had these life-size dolls of the goddess that they draped the sari on, and they did. Since it was a sentimental moment, my mother decided to take a photograph of the adorned doll to show to her sister and some relatives. Now's the creepy part. My mother took a picture of the fully adorned doll, but when she actually looked at the photo in her gallery, the doll didn't appear to have any draping at jewelry and looked like it did before it was adorned. We were stumped, and ever the skeptic, I took pictures on my phone and we all took turns on each of our phones, and the same thing happened. Fully dressed up doll appears without any of that in the pictures. My mom asked the priest, and he said something like the goddess accepted our offering or something and it was a sign, but I couldn't believe it. There's nothing in science I could think of or find to rationalize it, but it happened. I wish I was hallucinating, but I wasn't. I was probably about 6 at the time, living in Guatemala. My sister, 2, and I shared a room with a night light by each bed. Room was pretty bright even at night. Thinking back on it, we had 3 giant German shepherds that lived next door. One night I wake up and I hear them barking constantly as if ready to attack something. I think nothing of it and try to go back to bed, but nothing. I turn to my right where there was a window. Standing in front of the window about 2 feet away from my bed was a shadowy figure. The window wasn't open. The room was on the 2nd floor overlooking our walled-in backyard, and remember, it's pretty damn bright in this room, but the figure is just a whole shadow, staring at me. 6-year-old me does the coherent thing and tries to be brave. I shrug it off, turn around and as a shield pull the sheets over my head. Do this for about a minute and decide no way. I turn around and the figure is just in front of the bed now, still dark as ever. I immediately get up and sprint to my parents' room. Peace out, sis. I don't quite remember what happened, but my parents tell me that they got my sister out of the room and put our old mattresses in front of the door blocking the entrance. Whatever I saw, they believed I saw. We moved out shortly thereafter. I was at a sleepaway camp in Maine in the early 90s, probably 12 years old or so. My cabin mates and I are in a van, being driven to an even more remote area of Maine for a camping trip. It's at least a 3 or 4 hour drive. I'm sitting in the back of the van and I fall asleep. I have a dream that I'm playing basketball with my cabin mates on the court at our camp. We did this a lot. In the dream, a friend passes me the ball, but he does it really fast, and I barely have any time to react. I basically just flail my arms in front of me so I can block the ball and not get hit in the face. I guess the dream was so realistic, that I flail my arms in real life, hitting the seat in front of me, which startles me, and I wake up. Groggy and confused, I immediately look to my left at my cabin mate sitting next to me. He looks like he's asleep, but then he immediately flails his arms forward, hits the seat in front of him and wakes up. He's groggy and confused and says, "Oh man, I just had a dream a basketball was coming right at my face and I tried to deflect it." For a second I thought he was mocking me, but he was serious, and I told him my dream, and we all thought it was pretty weird. My husband and I bought our first house a few years ago. We couldn't afford much, so we bought an old Civil War era farmhouse out of foreclosure. It was a great home for us with tons of charm and character. My sister stayed overnight after we had lived about there for a month. She slept on the couch in the room below our bedroom. At approximately 3 a.m. my husband and I and our 2 dogs woke up to this huge crash downstairs. It literally shook the house. It was a massive sound. I got up and bolted down the long flight of stairs, fully expecting to see someone sedan halfway through one of the walls. All I saw was my sister sitting up on the couch in the darkness. "What was that?" she asked me. I didn't have a clue, so the 3 of us checked out the house for something that had fallen over, some broken shelf, or anything that could explain the crash. Nothing. 1 week later, no one besides us and our dogs are home. At approximately 3 a.m. the 4 of us are ripped awake by another huge crash and fucking frantic footsteps up our long staircase. It sounded like someone was running up our stairs to our bedroom door, which is directly at the top. Our dogs were barking and freaking out. I said, "Someone's in our house. Someone's in our house." I told my husband to call 911 as I reached into my bedside table to grab my protection hammer. Before my husband hit call, we both paused and listened. Our dogs stopped barking but were obviously agitated. Nothing. No sounds. Absolutely nothing. We expected the intruder to be standing still in the hallway outside our bedroom door. Now, I wasn't going to wait to be attacked, so I leapt up and flung open the door to meet this person face to face. Nothing. Just an empty black hallway at the top of a very long flight of stairs. As I stared into the silent blackness, my hair stood on end. I began to realize that there was never anyone in our house, at least not anyone we could see. The most eerie silence filled the house. Once we worked up the nerve, we looked through the house and came up without any explanation. This event was so terrifying that retelling it makes my eyes water and gives me constant goosebumps. I hate this story. Those frantic running footsteps are a sound I will never forget. A number of years ago, I was using an online chat site and got talking to a woman who claimed to live around 50 miles from me. We chatted quite happily for a couple of days, then on the third day, a Saturday night, she was online and we were chatting, but she seemed different somehow. Something just didn't seem right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. She explained that she was drinking and I assumed that this was the reason behind the melancholy. We continued chatting and she put on a cam so I could see her there drinking as we chatted. Over a couple hours of chatting, her mood appeared to grow darker and she appeared distressed but was hesitant to elaborate further. She left and returned around 30 minutes later and appeared drunker and more distressed. This time she had a stack of tablets on the table in front of her. She claimed that she couldn't go on and started to take tablet after tablet. I had no idea what this medication was. She was continuing to take more and more tablets and her speech was getting more and more slurred. I was suddenly in a terrible position. Was I seeing someone take their own life on a live stream and totally unable to do anything? All I had was a name and a town, both of which could be false. I made the excuse of needing the toilet and left the room, and took this opportunity to call my local police and explain the situation. The police took what details I knew and I was told to go back and try and keep her talking and try and get further details from her. They sent a plainclothed officer to my house and whilst I was chatting to her he pulled up the chat logs and history on his laptop. By this time her speech was becoming more and more incoherent and the cam was knocked so it was impossible to see her. Soon the connection was lost. Was this real? Was it fake? I had no idea of knowing. The police officer was during this time on the phone with the station giving them what information he had been able to obtain. He then left leaving me to contemplate. The next evening I got a call from the local police station, who wanted to thank me. The police had managed to trace her through her IP address and had been able to attend. It apparently was a genuine suicide attempt and she had been taken to hospital and was subsequently undergoing treatment.